Hello, fifth graders. Good morning. It's a new week and I'm grateful to be spending part of it with you distance learning. This week you're going to be reading and learning about the Titanic, the huge cruise liner ship that hit an iceberg and sunk. And it's an interesting story. If you have the Pearson Success Net, we're still trying to get it fixed for fifth graders to read. I need to check on that this morning. But if it's working, I highly recommend that you read that story. It's super interesting. Also, look for your classroom connections that was sent by email this morning. It includes links for our Zoom class meeting and on Tuesdays, plus my office hours on Tuesday and Thursday. The expectation is that you are working 2 to 3 hours each week on each subject. I also want you to be independently reading for 30 to 60 minutes each day, each weekday. That's Monday through Friday, and continue reading on the weekend if you would like. Let me know if you have any questions. Today's story is called Tea Leaves and Buried Treasure. The story of how a sign and a teacup set 12-year-old George Benner off on an exciting adventure. Please, Aunt Patience, what can you see in the tea leaves? In the snug kitchen of his aunt's big farmhouse near Montpelier, Vermont, George Benner drained his teacup and handed it across the table. Aunt Patience turned the cup in her thin hand and said briskly, "Why, I see an old sea chest with a pirate's chart. If you follow the directions, you'll find a lot of money." That night, as he sat by the stove with his aunt's tiger cat in his lap, George turned to Aunt Patience's sister, Emmeline. "Aunt Emmeline," he said, "tell me the story of the old pirate who scared you so years ago." Fifth graders, I'm going to pause right now because I forgot to tell you our amazing words. This week they are, and repeat after me please, trunk, foreign, seafaring, and treasure. Let's listen for those words as I continue the story. "I thought you might be asking him about that trunk tonight," Aunt Emmeline said with a smile. She folded her sewing and laid it on the table. "It was just getting dark. I happened to look out of the window and saw the stagecoach stop down the road a piece. Out climbed a queer old man with long white hair and a kind of sash tied around his waist. From the top of the coach, he took down a small brass-bound trunk, a big suitcase trunk. Then, balancing it on his shoulder, he started walking right toward this house. As he got closer, I saw that he was wearing gold earrings. I was scared when he knocked on the door, but I opened it just the same. He politely asked if he could stay the night, said he was looking for an old shipmate who had settled somewhere in the neighborhood. I told him to leave the trunk in the shed and showed him where to wash. After supper, he talked about all the foreign places he'd been to in more than 50 years of seafaring. Next morning, he fetched me a pail of water from the well and chopped some wood for me. After breakfast, he said he'd be shoving off to look for his friend. He offered to pay me if I'd let him leave the trunk for a few days. I said I'd be glad to look after it for nothing, and off he went. And that, George, is the last time I ever saw him. I had his trunk taken up to the attic, and there it is still today. No one's ever opened it, and no one's going to. That's his trunk, and one of these days, he'll show up to claim it." Several summers later, George Benner and a friend of the same age called George Levensler were staying in the aunt's farmhouse. One rainy day, they started talking about the pirated treasure, and the boys persuaded Aunt Emmeline to let them open the trunk. George Benner pointed out that if the old pirate had been 80, as Aunt Emmeline had guessed, by now he'd be 120. When they started to open the trunk, the straps almost crumbled in their hands. But the lock had to be forced. Right, raising the lid, they found, under a bundle of moth-eaten garments, an unfinished carved model of a sailing ship, several ornaments made from shells, and an old quadrant, and a copy of The Pirate by Sir Walter Scott. Not the treasure I don't think they were looking for, but interesting stuff no less. An old quadrant would have been a surveying instrument that they used when they were at sea to tell where they were going. So we heard treasure, we heard the other ones. Now I've lost my page. We heard about right here somewhere. Oh my goodness. Trunk, that's where he stored his belongings. Foreign, from a distant land. Seafaring, going to sea. And treasure. We all know what treasure is. Well, I look forward to seeing you at our Tuesday Zoom meeting. Please contact me during office hours, or you can send me an email anytime. I hope you have a great week. Goodbye for now, Mr. Conger.